are spent tonight?
I remember when I was a teenager, we used to go to the mountains to the Pioneer. And
That was the name of the hotel.
Yeah, it was a big stuff.
Wow.
Gitzvach of David.
Actually, there's a big Yom Tov. Yeah, bungalow colonies spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for entertainment. So in your days, things probably were much simpler. People didn't go so all out.
That's what you think.
Oh, they used to go to
You used to go to a hotel for the weekend, and it cost a Hein Rav. And there was a show, Motzoei Shabbos, and there was a live Broadway show.
Really?
Yeah, geared to the Jewish people.
Like a Jackie Mason type of show.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay, let's see if we have today's sponsors. The sponsors for last week, at least, with the same thing with this week, are the Menzelowski family, none of the Ofer of the Chasna of Heshi, the Chavi Martyr, and by Dudi and Penny Zimmerman, Little Nishmas, Sora, Cyril, Bas, somebody Akoin Mandelbaum, whose yahrzeit is Yudah Aleph Av, which was today. Today was the baby yahrzeit. Okay. Zogt the Heilige Mishnah. Neusnin Tavshel, Latoy Chabor. I think we're at the bottom of Kufmem Vavim and Beis. I think.
Didn't you say you were in Amid Aleph?
Kufmem Zayin and Beis. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. We're at the bottom of Kufmem Zayin and Beis.
Amid Aleph, you said.
That's right. Kufmem Zayin and Beis. I apologize. I was a little bit famished. You're right. The Mishnah at Kufmem Zayin and Beis. Thank you. I don't even know where I'm holding. Never mind what day we are. I don't even know what's going on.
Yossi, I wanted to suggest today's daf only because I looked at it over Shabbos.
Yossi, we have the benefit of only learning one daf, Yomi. We have to hold the multiple sugyas.
Okay, Shmuel, so what's the title of tonight's daf?
Boat shul towels. Can you use them on Shabbos or not?
Very good. When we go to TOSH or Yom Kippur, so they have these towels on the loops that spin around and around. So my kids always ask, why is it that wherever there's a towel in TOSH, there's always coincidentally a sink right near it? And the answer is simple. So if by mistake you touch the towel, you can quickly wash your hands.
Wash your hands. Right.
So that's very good, Shmuel. Excellent. Okay.
You go first at the TOSH?
Yom Kippur. I'm not sure about this year. This year, all bets are off.
Maybe
like, are they going to let live single out?
Maybe the daf should be called "Don't Touch the Towels."
Very good.
Very good. It's very excellent. Don't touch the towels. Don't touch the towels in the boat shul.
If somebody washes in the water in a cave or the water of Tveria, and the Gemara is going to tell us, we're talking about water that was warm. Chame Tveria is warm. Meimayr is also water that was warmed. And Rashi says the reason why they would have heated mikvahs in the Ma'ira, because the fact that it was covered over retained the heat better. So whenever they wanted to have heated mikvahs, they would make them covered. And then Vinistapik, he came out of the mikveh and he used the Tasha towels. Vinistapik, and he wiped himself off with his towel. But don't think that the towel was totally soaked and absorbed with water, because afilu be'eser alon toyis, even if he used 10 towels, so the towels for sure aren't drenched, because if you use 10 towels, each towel is only going to be absorbing a very little bit of water. Nevertheless, we're still afraid you might squeeze it out by mistake. And therefore, Zok the Mishnah, lo yeviyim biyadai. Don't carry them home, of course, in a place where you're allowed to carry. Don't carry them by hand, because we're afraid that while you're walking, you might squeeze out the water, even though we're speaking about just a small amount of water. Avlasar b'nei adam, but 10 people, this is the Tasha towel. Avlasar b'nei adam, Mistapkin balointis achas peneim yedeim vergleim. They are allowed to all share one towel, and it doesn't dafka mean peneim yedeim vergleim. It just means that under others, if people were taking a bath and their whole body was wet, they're not likely to share a towel. But if someone's just washing their hands, like by the TOSH sink, then in fact, 10 people could share the same towel on a good day. And then if they're all bringing the towel home together, then in Mavin Oisun Biyodon, then they're allowed to carry it. And the Gemara will tell us is because since there's many people around, nobody is going to by mistake squeeze it out because there's other people around that will remind the person that he's not allowed to do that. Now, sochin, you're allowed to smear oil on Shabbos. Umemashmashin, you're allowed to massage your whole body on Shabbos. Avaloimis amlin, you're not allowed to do a deep tissue massage because it's derech shalchoil. Valoimis garin, and they used to have like something of a flat surface that they would scrape their skin with. Again, it's something that felt good. So you're not allowed to do those. Ein yordin lekurdima. You're not allowed to go into a river called Kurdima, which was somewhere in Yisrael in Shevet Yehuda, and the Gemara is going to explain the problem with it. And I think the Gemara is going to explain that it's very slippery there on the shoreline, and you might fall in and make your clothing wet, and then you'll squeeze them out. Vein oishin apiktuzin. Apiktuzin is if you ate by a kiddush and it was delicious, but you didn't know that they were going to serve chont. So by the time the kugel came out and the lechem brov came out, and herring, you were totally full, and then they brought out the chont, and now you don't know what to do. How am I going to fit it? So apictozin is a type of serum that if you drink it, it makes everything come out, and then you have room. So you're not allowed to drink this serum because it's like refuah b'Shabbos. Veid ma'atzvin is a cotton. You're not allowed to straighten out the limbs of a child. And we learned earlier that you are allowed to do it when the baby's born. So we're going to have to see where this issur applies and where it doesn't. Vein machzirin is a shever. You're not allowed to set a broken bone on Shabbos. And again, that's going to be something that we're going to have to look into in more detail. Misha nifra kayadi v'ragloi. If someone's arm or leg, the joint popped out, lo yutra from you're not allowed to rub it with cold water. That was a therapy that would make the joint pop back in. You're allowed to stam wash, then the nisrapa. And if in the process of washing around, it ends up popping back in and it gets better, you're allowed to. And in fact, we're going to find a similar story in the Gemara. As the Gemara was exploring different things that you're allowed to do or not, his elbow got popped back in. But we'll see in the Gemara. The fact that the Mishnah introduces Meimaira side by side with Meitferya, it's trying to tell us that there's a similarity here. Ma Meitferya chamen, just like the Meitferya that the Mishnah is referring to are warm water, af Meimaira chamen, so too we're talking about washing in warm water when it says haroichetz. Now the Mishnah is telling us haroichetz b'di'evet, haroichetz de'evedin lechatchila. So the Mishnah is telling us that you're not allowed to wash in warm water on Shabbos. Now we do know that you are allowed to wash in Chamet Tferya on Shabbos. As a matter of fact, the only reason why you're not allowed to wash with warm water on Shabbos, we learned, was a Gzera D'Rabbanan. And they also at one point extended that Gzera even to Chamet Tferya. But people weren't listening. People rejected that Gzera. And because of that, they backed off on the Chamet Tferya. So when it says Haroichetz, the Evidin Chatchiloloi, Rashi tells us Amei Ma'irikoi. It's only referring to artificially heated water, but it's not referring to Meitferya. The reason why the Tana mentions Meitferya is just to teach us that we're talking about warm water. But Avada Meitferya would be the Chatchila, one is allowed to wash in Meitferya on Shabbos.
You're not allowed to go into a warm mikve on Shabbos.
It says not. It says Harech everything Chiloi. So the mikvahs are, I guess, what's considered chamen. Whatever we have our mikvahs at, obviously, is not considered chamen. Otherwise, it wouldn't be allowed. So the evidin Chiloi mechlal, we see that dafka totally immersing and bathing in chamen is also. But lishtativ kol gufoy afilu l'chatchila shakardomi. So Rashi shoyfchen al gufoy. If you're pouring warm water on yourself, like a shower, the lav derech rechitzahi, that's not the normal way to do rechitza. Shori l'chatchila afilu b'chamen. So I don't know if that refers to our showers, but pouring hot water on yourself would be allowed even l'chatchila. Mani, who holds like that? Because that's a kula tikashita that I don't think we paskin like. So tomorrow Shimoni, the Tanya lo yishtativ odam bein bechamen bein betonin divrei meir, and Reb Shimon is matir, and Reb Yehuda says bechamen oser betonin muter. So it's only the shita of Reb Shimon who holds that one may pour hot water on himself. I don't believe that we pass like this. V'nistapik afilu be'esar lontis. Even if each towel barely absorbed any water, because you use 10 towels, you're not allowed to carry it. Zoktumar Resha Rabusa Kamashmalan. The Resha that tells us that even one person with 10 towels may not carry them home. The Sefer that says 10 people with one towel is allowed to carry it home. Kamashmalan. Either way, they're telling us a chiddush. Resha Rabusa Kamashmalan. Even these towels that have very little water in them, given the chad who, since he's only one person, also the shchita. The sefer abusu kamashmon, and the chiddush of the sefer is afila hanid the fishibu. These towels that are soaked with water, given the rabbim they know, since there's multiple people walking together, mitkari adali, they'll remind each other not to be over chas v'shalom under shchita. Toner rabban mistabek odem balointos umanicha b'chaloin. They had lockers in their mikvahs. So if someone uses the mikveh on Shabbos, he should put his towel in his locker. But lo yibsirena, don't leave it to the attendant. They are choshed to squeeze out towels. So don't give him the towel because we don't want him squeezing it. Put it into your locker. You're allowed to use one towel, and you are allowed to carry it home. So Reb Shimon clearly is arguing in our Mishnah. So Omerle Abai RebYosy Hilchos. So what is the halacha? Are you allowed to carry a towel home or not? Omerle Ha Reb Shimon Ha Rebbe Ha Shmuel Ha Reb Yochanan. We have Reb Shimon, we have Rebbe, we have Shmuel, and we have Reb Yochanan. That all of them agree that you're allowed to carry home this towel. Unlike our Mishnah, they all argue on the Mishnah. So we have strong reason not to paskin like our Mishnah Chomer. Rather, l'kula, to allow the towel to be carried home. Rab Shimon Hada Amran, we've already illustrated where Rab Shimon says that you're allowed to carry it home. He says it beferish. Rab Shimon Omer, mistapik, beladis, achsel, vilasach, beizai. But we're going to discuss now the other people. Rebbe, where did Rebbe say that this would be allowed? The Tanya Amar Rebbe, Kishahayidon made him Torah Echel Rab Shimon b'tekua, when we were learning Torah, Bar Rab Shimon tekua, Hayinu Mailin Shemen Valointis, we would go to the mikveh. We would carry this for Reb Shimon. We would carry this for Reb Shimon, shemen and alointis, oil and towels, mechotzel agag or megabel karfif, and this is going according to Reb Shimon Shita, who holds that you're allowed to go from all these places. So instead of walking through Shus Rabbin, which would not have been allowed to carry, they mapped out an alternate route through Chatzeris and Gagin and Karfifs, which Reb Shimon does allow you to carry there. Until we were able to get legally to a mayin, where we would wash them. So Rashi tells us if they slept all the way to the mayin, the likelihood is they didn't leave their towel there. They must have brought their towel back. Rashi says, it's not likely that they would have abandoned and left their towels there. So they must have brought it with them. The other shot we have to bring up, it says hayinu, when we were there, which is mashma plural. So TOSH tells us, mistama yechidi haya, even though there remain talmidim, only one talmud at a time would have accompanied Reb Shimon to the mikvah. There was probably only one talmud there, because when he was in the mikvah. The time my rabbi tzarich didn't mutter. Reb Shimon probably didn't need a whole entourage when he went to the mikveh. He needed one shamis. Clearly, they sort of separated a little bit And Reb Shimon wasn't there carrying the towel with him, because otherwise there wouldn't be a problem anyway. That's really Shiyachan Mutlavia Lechashin Leschita. The Hadikamer Hayinu Hayinu, which is Lashon Rabbim, what Shlomo called Echad ve'Echad b'fnei atzmai, each Talmud, when it was his turn to accompany Reb Shimon to the mikve, that you would carry this towel. So the raya is from the fact that they would carry this towel for Reb Shimon, and he didn't have a problem with it. So you see they did it. And this is Rebbe talking. So Rebbe is, we know already Reb Shimon is matter. We already quoted Reb Shimon, but you see here Rebbe did it as well.
So it isn't necessary. I remember in camp, Rabbi Yaakov Teitelbaum used to go to Emory Brook to Tevel Shabbos morning, and he had a towel there from Friday, and he used the towel.
Because he didn't have a
left
nerve.
the towel there.
Right. He didn't have a nerve. Yeah, you're allowed. Shmuel, what's the story with Shmuel, who you see he's matter? Shmuel, Mistapik Odin Ballointis, a person who's allowed to wipe himself with a towel. So it's also pretty explicit. So since we have so much strong support that you're allowed to carry your towel home, in fact, we paskin that you're allowed to take your towel. We're not worried you're going to squeeze it. In fact, say you're allowed to take your towel. The problem is, Rabbi Yochanan also passes like a Stam Mishnah, and our Mishnah says, "Not going to stop it. I feel better. So just lo yavim biyadai." So tomorrow, ahu keben chachinoi masni law. Rabbi Yochanan is garish in our Mishnah that it's not a Stam Mishnah, that it's quoted in the name of Ben Chachinoi, which is a Shidduch Yochid, and not a Stam Mishnah, and therefore Rabbi Yochanan doesn't pass like it. Amar Chiba Abba Rabbi Yochanan ha'ulayrin, the people who are the attendants of the mikveh, they have to have towels for the women that can use the mikveh. So Mavin Belori Noshim, they're allowed to bring the towels that the women use. The women use Rasha's Sadinim Shanoshim Mistapkim Bahem. These were the towels that the women would, or the sheets that the women would dry themselves with. Mutalavin Derech Malbush Leves Mechos. So they wore them. They wore them as a beggar, so there was no problem of carrying. Mavin Bali Noshim Levei Bani to the Beis HaMerchos. Uvelvachi Yiskasa Ben Roshon Verubon. As long as they're going to use it to cover their bodies with, so they're carrying it derech malbish. Saknisa. What is a saknisa? Shirashi tells us it was a very thin type of beged that the woman would wear. Also, when they came out to keep it dry, so the gadol shetoloi beik seifov, it would be hang down between the shoulders, v'roisha atavpoi, and his head would be wrapped with it. Again, that kept someone dry and clear, dry. When he came out of the mikvah. So tzarich l'kasher beis roshel lamata. The two sides of the shawl that come below his shoulders have to be tied because it's lightweight and we don't want it blowing away. Lamata miksofai. You have to tie it down underneath your shoulders. Amalu rava lebnei mechuza ki mavrisu mani lebnei chela. They used to have armies that would come through the city, and they would literally, and the people of the city had to support them, had to give them what they need. They would destroy these cities because they would suck the life out of them. But nevertheless, people in the city had to supply clothing to the people from the army. So when you're carrying on Shabbos clothing of nechela, again, wrap them around you and tie them below your shoulder, so it should be derech malbush, so therefore you wouldn't be carrying. You're allowed to smear and you're allowed to massage on Shabbos lightly. You're allowed to lightly massage your belly on Shabbos. As long as you don't do it like you do it at night. I'm getting a feedback. Am I the only one who hears it?
I hear it also.
So I'm going to mute everybody, and if anybody wants to unmute themselves, gesundheit. In the meantime, I'm muting everybody. Okay, so up to Hela Gemor weiter. So what do you do? So how do you do it that it should be differently than you do it the choil? So Chanina says the normal way that people used to do these things is first they would massage themselves and then they would put oil. So therefore, on Shabbos, you should do it differently. You should soch first. You should put the oil, and then you should do massage. RebYosy said no. During the week, people did it either way. There was no order to the soch or the mashmash. Sometimes they put the oil first. Sometimes they did the massage first. So you have to do something else that will be different. So he said soch umamashmash b'basachas. He would massage and oil at the same time, which was not the normal way that it's done. Loimit almlin, you're not allowed to do a deep tissue massage. Also, you're not allowed to stand in the floor of the Demyumsis. That was the river that we were talking about earlier, that the Mishnah says, no, it says Kerdima. And you're in the Kerdima. It doesn't say, it's not talking about the Yumsis. We'll have to see that later. So he's saying you're not allowed to go into this river called the Yumsis. And the reason why is because it actually has healing properties. It has the sand in there. The water there, it's very salty water, and it warms up. It warms up your body. The very salty clay at the bottom of this river somehow has therapeutic properties. So therefore, you're not allowed to go into it on Shabbos. Now, the properties that are in this river only help seasonally. In other words, you can't go anytime. There's only a specific period of time throughout the year where these properties are dominant and that is healing qualities. The entire year, the Yumsis has its therapeutic properties only for a short season. There's only 21 days where there's a special quality of this water, this river to help. And in these 21 days, Shavuos is part of those days. So the Gemara assumes that Shavuos is either the first day or Shavuos is the last day. I'm not sure why the Gemara assumes that. But the Gemara says, Atzeres lahagisa or lahagisa. Is the first day of this 21-day period Shavuos, or is the last day of this 21-day period Shavuos? TOSH Madam Shmuel, Kulu Shekiani midivcha veratzarta molu. All of these different types of drinks that was going to help, Rashi's mashkin refuah, all these different types of mashkin refuah are only good midivcha, which is referring to Pesach. Miloshin divcha is a lotion of carbon, zivcha. Midivcha veratzarta malu. So you see that the healing season is from Pesach till Shavuos, which would indicate that Shavuos would be the last day of the 21-day period that this river helps. So Gemara, no, it's not a raya. Dilma Hasam, who the Kamadakar Alma Mali. Maybe those drinks, the cooler things are, the better it is for the therapy. Aval we know the healing qualities of this river are its heat. So therefore, keeping the chamim almot feimali. Maybe it's better when it's warmer, and maybe Shavuos will be the first day of the 21-day period, because as the summer moves, as we move towards the spring and summer, it gets warmer. Omar Chelboy, Chamer de Pergaisa, wine from a city of Pergaisa, which was very, very chosh of a wine. It's very chosh of wine. Umay de Debubsis, and water from this river, again, which had very strong therapeutic properties. Kibchu Aseres HaShvatim Yisrael. They took out, eliminated 10 Shvatim. How did it do that? So Rashi says, because since they were so indulgent in these therapies, so Yubali Hano, they were indulgent in giving themselves pleasure. And because of that, and since they were not oishuk b'torah, they were busy, involved in pleasuring themselves. It caused them to leave the ways of the Torah, lo yaleinu. So Zok to Gemara, Rabbi Lezer ben Aruch, ikloi lahasam. So the ArtScroll gives us a little bit more of an insight of the story that happened. He brings it from the Medrash, that after their Rebbe died, I believe it was Rabbi Yochanan, the yeshiva decided that they want to move to Yavne. Rabbi Lezer ben Aruch was a wealthy guy, and his wife said, "What do we schlep to Yavne for? We don't have to go to Yavne. Let's stay in this city where this river was, and you're the most chashuv of Talmud anyway, so you don't have to go to them. They should come to you, and you'll see they'll end up following you." So he ended up settling in this city where this the Yumsus was. And Imshich Basrayu, I'm sorry, Imshich Basrayu, he also got used to the finer things in life, such as the high quality wine there and the therapeutic properties of the river. And because of that, he akar Talmudei. Being that he was a orangutan in his pleasures, it caused him to forget his learning. He forgot his learning. He hadar also, eventually he felt bad, so he wanted to join them. So when he finally joined them, Kam lemikri b'safra, he wanted to read from the Torah. Boy lemikra hachodesh hazalachem, he wanted to read the pasuk. I think it's Pasha Ve'era, I think. He wanted to read the pasuk to the Chodesh Hazalachem Rosh Chodashim, and he didn't read it properly. Hashem made him make a mistake. Omar hacheresh hoyalibam, which was almost like a sign that his heart became deaf. In other words, he lost his mojo. Bo Rabbanan Rachmi Alei, the Rabbanan, his friends davened for him, Hadu Talmudei, and his learning returned to him. Rabbi Nehiroi said, "Have a goyla l'makom Torah. You should always go to golos l'makom Torah. V'al toimer shi tovei acharecha. Don't say that I'm going to stay here where I am and my friends will come to me. Rather, if you see your friends, the Oyam Torah is moving to Yavne, join them. Shechaverecha yikaimu biyodcha. Your chaverim will help that your Torah will be niskayim. And why is that, so Rashi? If you're learning one mesechta and they're learning a different mesechta, tishma'ena, you'll hear them learning as well. So even when you're learning a different mesechta, since your friend is learning something else, you're always sort of in touch with all different mesechtas, and that'll keep you sharp and then on the ball, and your Torah will grow and will not be nishtaka. And don't rely on your own chachma. And Rashi says, "Loimer chacham gadolani." I'm a very smart guy. V'zachron, I have an excellent memory. Just because I'm a middle learning by the Basra, I'm not going to forget kedushin. I'll be able to do it well. Don't say that. Zok Gemara, what does Rabbi Neroi, who said these halachas, have to do with Rabbi Elazar ben Arach? Zok Gemara, Tanya loy Rabbi Neroi Shemoi. His name was really not Rabbi Neroi. Ela Rabbi Nechemiah Shemoi. His name was Rabbi Nechemiah. Well, Amrila, and there are those who say Rabbi Elazar ben Arach Shemoi. So Rabbi Elazar ben Arach was speaking from personal experience. Have a goyla makom Torah, because I made that mistake and it was the wrong decision. So now he's telling everybody else, don't make that mistake. If his name was Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, why does the bracha quote him as Rabbi Nehiroi? Because he was such a master Talmid Chacham, he would light up the eyes of all the Chacham in halacha because he knew everything. Zok Tehillah Gemara Vayter. Avaloi Miskarin. You're not allowed to scrape your skin with the scraper. Tanarban in Goyin b'Megareres b'Shabbos. You're not allowed to scrape with the scraper on Shabbos. The ArtScroll has a funny word for it. I never heard that name before of that device that the ArtScroll quotes. Anyway, if your feet are dirty, then goyer kedakar, then you're allowed to scrape, because everybody knows you're not doing a ma'aseh choil, which was this scraping for therapy. You're scraping clearly because your feet are dirty, and that for sure is allowed on Shabbos. You don't have to be worried. Rabbi Yehuda, his mother made for him megarar to the kaspa. She made him a special megarar for Shabbos. So again, it would show that this is not a ma'aseh choil, to show that this was a Shabbos-tika, thing, and therefore there wouldn't be a problem. Ein Yordan Lekurdino. You're not allowed to go into this river. My time, I'm from Pika. Rashi says, Tit Shaloishanar Machlik. The shorelines were very, very slippery, or when you go into the water, the floor, the riverbed was very slippery, and a person would slip, and if he would slip and fall in the water, his clothing would get wet. Big day Adim Nisharan B'Mayim, they would get soaked in water, when the person would fall. That's why you're not allowed to go into this river. You're not allowed to make this regurgitating not to drink this refrigerated formula on Shabbos. That we say you're not allowed to do it is only if you're drinking some potion that's going to cause you to do it. And Rashi says because that's Domer L'Refuah, there's a gzera of Schika Samamon. Aval b'yad, but sticking your finger in mutter, that's mutter, like the famous story where the guy who ate too much by a kiddush. So his friend said, "Like a finger, sados kimis machen platz es kenasamer." So he said, "Mishigim enicha platz for a finger like a pickle." So that's what the Gemara is saying. Tanya of the Chavi Omer, you're never allowed to make stuff throw up. So shoot the geld. You have expensive food in there. All the things you ate is expensive. You don't want to throw that out. It's baltashkus, so you're not allowed to make yourself regurgitate. So the answer to the problems is portion control, not bulimia. You're not allowed to straighten up the limbs of a baby. When you wrap a baby tight, right when it's born, in its receiving blanket, that's allowed, even though that also puts everything in place. In fact, the more our Mishnah says otherwise, but not on ein matzivin. So the more hakam b'churmi shedra, that's where we're talking about vertebrae. The mechsika boina looks like boina. And Rashi says a little bit more. Rashi's chulishal shedra shnispark achas man, one of his vertebrae slipped out of place. But the main point of Rashi is ula achas man kamari. We're not speaking about at birth. At birth, you're allowed to straighten the child out. We had a sugya just like it was exactly in this position over here. It was right here that said that all these things you're allowed to do for a baby, and one of them was wrapping it up. Later on, not when the baby's born, if vertebrae or something moves out of place, that you wouldn't be allowed to do. You're not allowed to set a broken bone. Omar B'chana B'Agdasa said, Amar Shmuel, halacha, the halacha is machzir nesashever. You are allowed to set a broken bone on Shabbos. Rabbi B'chana showed up to Pumbedisa, and loyal pirkei Rabbi Yehuda. He didn't go to Rabbi Yehuda's shir. Rabbi Yehuda gave a shir in Pumbedisa. He heard Rabbi B'chana came to town, and Rabbi B'chana did not come to learn by his shir. So Shadrei la'ada daila. He sent his shamis Ada. Omalei, he told him, Zil Garbe, force him to come. Rashi says, Kach Bigdo Yachiyove, take his clothing away and don't give it back to him until he comes to pick it up. In other words, do whatever you have to do to get him to come to my shir. Also Garbe, also, so he came to get his beged. Ashkecha, he saw Rabbi B'chana saw Rabbi Yehuda darshaning. Dorish ein machshin v'shever. Rabbi Yehuda was darshaning the halacha that we learned in our Mishnah. Omerlei, so Rabbi Bar Bachana piped up in chair, he hacked in, and he said, Omer Rabchana Bagdasa Omer Shmuel, halacha machzir nesashever. Omerlei, he told him, Ha Chana didon. So Rabbi Yehuda said, Chana himself said that you could. Well, Shmuel didon. So Chana is from us, he was a Rebbe in Bavel. And Shmuel was also a Rebbe B'Yas in Bavel. They both are unzer mentioned. And I never heard this halacha. Rabbi Yehuda said these are unzer mentioned that paskin that it's mutter, and I never knew about it. So you're upset at me for schlepping you? Valav v'dina gabretich. Didn't I not do the right thing by making you come to my shir? If you wouldn't have come to my shir, I would have always wrongly paskined l'chumr that you're not allowed to set a bone. When in fact, Nevada you're allowed to. So I'm so happy I forced you to come because only through that did we all have the benefit of learning the right halacha. So I just want to quickly learn this halacha in the Mishavura because it's a relevant thing. Shin Chav Ches Sif Mem Zayin. So we'll just quickly run through it. There's an interesting Mishnah Brura, and I noticed that the article also points out the Mishavura, so it's also pretty interesting. You see, it's important. Shin Chav Ches Shakach. That's a nice Sif Mem Zayin. Sif Mem Zayin. Okay, here we go. The Mechaber Paskins Etzem Sheyotzem Im Kaima, a bone that went out of place. Machzir no, so you're allowed to put it back. So let's see what the Mishabura says. That's our halacha l'maisa over here. Zokt heilige Mishabura. Where is it? Where is Mishabura? What number was it again? Kuf. Kuf Mem Hey. So Zok Mishabur in Sifkat and Kuf Mem Hey. Shiatum Kam. Amogen Avram Cholik Alzeh. The Mogen Avram argues. The Svirle the Davka Etzama Nishbar. So a dislocated bone, you're not allowed to put back into place, but a broken bone, you're avada allowed to set it. Mutalachsir Kadisha Begamora. Avala Etzam Handishmat Mim Kaimai. The Mishabur says if it just popped out, also lachsiroi. Tafilu l'shav shef b'tzayin asru. Kedisa. So what you see here is that our mechaber passenger even allowed to put a dislocated bone back into place. The Gavorm argues. The chazara, which would not be allowed. But the kukam echronim mikol mokim ayida any Yehudi, a guy for sure is allowed to put back a dislocated shoulder. Nira she'en lahachmer ubesever shulchan atzei shitim, and this is what the Arshbro quotes. Choyluk ala Mogen Avram. He argues with the Mogen Avram. The cause of it, he writes, the chol sheyotzim emkaimi lagamri, if it's completely snapped out of its joint, shekorin ois gelenkt, choshiv sakonas aver, it's considered that the whole aver is a sakona, kamoy nishbar, at least like it's treated as if it's completely broken. Im lo yachzir miyad, if you won't put it back right away in place, v'shori lahachzir, and therefore it's mutter to put those back. I feel like the Yisrael, even a Jewish doctor. So a dislocated joint, you're allowed to put back on Shabbos, even a Jewish doctor. And there, where it says you're not allowed to do it, is if it's not completely dislocated, it's partially dislocated. I'm not sure how you could tell the difference. Near the Gamal Avram, my right for Omer, Shenifrek b'chazaka, if the doctor tells you that this is not a good situation and it could endanger the limb, I'll put it back. If I remember correctly, I had children that had dislocated, little babies had dislocated limbs on Shabbos, and I think the doctors put them back. The frum doctors did snap them back into place on Shabbos. So Pasha, you're allowed to, and for sure you're allowed to set a bone that's broken in a cast. For sure that's allowed to be done. Okay, Zok Elig Gemara Vater. Misha Nifra Kayadai. RebYosy have a Yosef committed RebYosy. RebYosy was sitting in front of RebYosy. Shon Layadai, and RebYosy himself had a limb dislocated. So he needed to know what he's allowed to do. So he was asking him different things that he might be able to do. Could I do this? Could I do that? In the meantime, at the Hachi, Itbach Yadai, while he was busy showing all the different movements that he wanted to do to find out that it was mutter or not, it popped back into place. Omer lei, mighty bailach. What's your shaila? Hatnan, it's pretty clear. It says Misha Nifraka Yadai oy Ragloi lo yitarfim b'tzoinin. You're not allowed to rub them heavily with cold water. Aval rechetz kedarka, you're allowed to just wash from the strap and the strap. Omer lei v'latnan, did we not learn ein machshirnis hashever? So you're telling me we learned Misha Nifraka Yadai, you're allowed to do it. And here it says ein machshirnis hashever. He said you're allowed to. Amalei. So the problem is don't bring me a riot from the Mishnah that I'm not allowed to do it, because guess what? The Mishnah also said in machzirnis hashever. Yet the Mishnah was overruled. We brought so many people who argued on the Mishnah, and because of that we overruled the Mishnah. So if we overruled the Mishnah, the halacha machzirnis hashever, so maybe we shouldn't be samech on the Mishnah by Mishnah Nifraka Yada either, and maybe I should be allowed to put it back. You're going to treat the whole Mishnah with one look, with one rash by riga achas argosoy. You think it's all woven together in one beged? Where we had Gemaras that teach us beferish, not the pasuk like the Mishnah, like by Shever, there you're allowed to do it. But we don't have any shita that opposes what our Mishnah said, that Nifraka Yodai will be also to put back into place. Therefore, you have to be machmer by Nifraka Yodai. Hadin al chavis b'neder, hadin al chavis, hadin al chavis. Zok Eilig Gemara Vater. Now we know normally the word she'ela refers to borrowing an object that I'm going to return intact. May I borrow your lawnmower? I take your lawnmower and then give you back your lawnmower. That's normally where the word shoel is used. Halva is normally used to describe something that I am going to borrow and not pay you back. Can you lend me $100,000? I'm not going to give you back those same $100,000, I'm going to give you back a different $100,000. That's the technical meaning of shayla. However, people started using the word shayla to refer to any type of very short-term borrowing or loan, and something that was longer-term, stam halvos lamijoim, and that's what halva would be used for. So therefore, Sakta Mishnah, shayla odem mechaveirei kadeh yayin de kadeh shemen. You're allowed to tell your friend, can I borrow from you a jug of oil or a jug of wine? And I'm going to pay you back a jug of oil and a jug of wine. You're not allowed to use the word halveni when you borrow something. And the reason why you're not allowed to do that, Rashi tells us, is because halveni mashmel is man ruba. Halveni has a connotation that I'm going to keep it for a longer period of time. And since you're borrowing a jug of oil from me, and you're not going to give it back to me tomorrow, you're not going to go shopping Sunday and buy me another oil. You plan to pay me back in a month. Therefore, I'm concerned that I'll forget that you owe me that oil. I'm liable on Shabbos, after lending you this oil, to mark it down so that I don't forget that you owe me the wine. So therefore, we only allow very short-term loans, not long-term, because anything that has a connotation of long-term, we have a concern that the lender is going to mark it down. A woman's allowed to go to her neighbor and says, do you have any extra bilkalach? Can I borrow some bilkalach? Now, what if you don't trust the guy who you're lending the money to? There was a guy in my yeshiva, if you wanted to borrow a pen from him, he would insist that you give him your driver's license, because then he knew he would get his pen back. So what if it's the type of person who's a verschlepped guy, he's not reliable, and you know you're going to lend him something, he's never going to give it back to you. So you can say, no problem, let me have your talis, give me your driver's license, and then and then after Shabbos, he could make sure that everything gets squared off. What happens if it's Erev Pesach, it's Shabbos? You need to have an animal to bring for your Korban Pesach. You didn't buy one yet. Now you got to find a vendor. Now this is not, the way I'm describing it now is not how the Gemara is going to remain lemaskana, but in the Havmina we'll assume this way. So it's Erev Pesach, it's Shabbos, I need to buy something. I can't buy in Shabbos, you can't do Masu Matan. So you go to the person who sells animals, here, I'll give you a mashkin, I'll leave you my driver's license, and give me an animal, and then we'll square off after Yom Tov. And after Yom Tov, you could square off.
What about aliyahs and pledges? Are those? Sorry, I had to bring that up, but is that considered a sale or a loan?
That's considered like a loan, but I guess we're not choshed that someone's going to write that down because we have paper clips.
Oh, so that doesn't count as writing down?
You have to. If they had paper clips in those days, this would be mutter too. We not only do we have paper clips, we have paper click.
Right. So the issue isn't the sale. The issue is then just the writing down.
Correct.
Right? Does not
the
make
issue
a
is the problem with writing down.
So otherwise, business we're mutter. So guy who's for years has never used to write something down, just does business by heart, is l'chara mutter.
Well, no, so you're asking me why wasn't there a problem of buying the Korban Pesach and doing business in the first place?
Correct.
Right. The Gemara is going to address that. That's a very good kasha, because besides the gzeira that I might mark it down, there's an additional problem of masu matan on Shabbos.
Correct.
Right. The Gemara is going to address that. But I don't think selling aliyahs is called masu matan.
Why not?
Well, how do we do it then?
For I don't know, tzarchei tzibur. It's we do because we always used to do it. That's why.
I thought it avoids machlokes. When the guy picked who he wanted to give it to, can you imagine the wars that would come?
Oh.
If you sell it, at least then whoever bought it gets it. Like I know a story where a divorce almost happened because there was a Slutvisher guy and he did a shidduch. He married a Heimish English girl, and the shver said, "I can't afford to support you. I don't have money. I cannot support you. Cannot support you." So for Fallon, the shver said he didn't have money. And then he comes to shul and they're selling aliyahs. And the guy says, $1,000 coin, $100,000 coin. And the shver bought an aliyah. And he says, are you crazy? You couldn't afford to support me. You spent $100,000 on an aliyah? He was freaking out. Then someone told him, no, here $1,000 is $1. Okay, you know, even the Chassidish places they call $1 1,000. So that was also a problem. Zok Teile Gemara. So let's see what happened over here.
So Bubba's gonna need a lot of money for their mikve then.
Amalei Rabba Bar Rav Chanan Labaye. My shno hashileni umashna halveni. What's the difference with the word used while asking to borrow the cake, while asking to borrow the wine? Amalei hashileni lo asil lemichtav. If somebody writes the word hashileni, it's not going to be written down. You know why? Because when you're telling me hashileni, I know you plan to pay me back right after Shabbos. I'm not going to write it down. But halveni, if you tell me halveni, that means you're planning not to pay me back right away. You're planning to pay me back in a while. Therefore, asil lemichtav. In fact, that doesn't make any sense. Fakibun de bechoil zimnon de boy lememer lehalveni vamer lehashileni v'lakapanelia. In choil, people use the words interchanged. They're not makbid to only use the word hashileni for short term and only use the word halveni for long term. People use the words. They use the words as they please. So oy bazoi v'asil lemichtav. So there's no problem during the week. So b'Shabbos nami asil lemichtav. So therefore, by Shabbos also, no matter what word the person who comes to me to borrow the product from me, no matter what they use, in the weekdays, if they used one of those two words, I'd write it down. So on Shabbos, why aren't you be choshid that I might write it down as well? On Malay, and there's a shaila, if you're supposed to be gorish, the next line, but the article does, so I'll read it. People aren't careful the way they speak when they speak in the weekday. It's one and the same, it doesn't matter. Therefore, also the michtav. But the Shabbos, on Shabbos, where they know that their Mishnah says, they know the Rabbanan told us to select your words carefully. But Shabbos, even the Ashileni who the Sharilei Rabbanan, and Alveni loy Sharilei, therefore Minkar Milsa. On Shabbos, people are going to be more precise in the wording that they use than they would be if they were just borrowing something in the weekday. And therefore, if they borrow or use the word Hashileni, the lender will not be concerned and he will not write it down. Amalei Rabba Bar Rav Chanan Labaye Michti Amar Rabbanan Kol Milu de Yom Tov Kamad Efshel Shni Mishaninam. We know that on Yom Tov, when you do a malach, if you have to, you should always try to do things a little differently. You're supposed to do things a little differently. Hani Nashi de Maya Chatzvayu Maya. These women who go to the river and they fill up their kalim with water, my time alay mishanin. Why don't they do things a little differently? Zok Gemara mishum delay efshar. They don't do it differently because let's think, what could they possibly do differently that would help? If they use a bigger bucket, are you suggesting they use a smaller bucket? That's not going to make it easier for them. That's going to make it harder for them. They're going to go back and forth 10 times instead of one time because each time they only get much less. So you want to suggest that you want to suggest that until now they use smaller kalim, they should use bigger kalim? Again, that's going to make it harder for them because it's going to be a heavier load. So there's no benefit in doing it that way. Nifrei sudra, if you suggest that we should cover the bottle, cover the pail with shmate, also they might end up squeezing it out. Nechasya benachdama, if you suggest that they should have a hard cover, well, if they have a hard cover, they're probably going to do like what they do in the shul with the vash temples, like we discussed once, that the most valuable asset that our shul has are vash temples. That's why they have to chain them to the wall. So if you had a lid on the pot, they would have some type of string that would connect the lid to the pot so it doesn't get lost. Zimnin the mifsik, if that string tore, they would tie it, which would lead to making a knot on Yom Tov. So because of that, since there's no real good way to make a shinoi, we don't suggest that they do that. Since there's no other option, we let them just draw the water the way they normally do. You're not allowed to clap. You're not allowed to pound your chest. And Rashi says that might even be metapkin is by Levi for sad things, but it means for happy things as well. Well, we're not going to allow to dance beyond it. TOSH says over here, like a Pirsha countries, that it's for sad things. You're not allowed to do a spade on Yom Tov. The time b'moed cut and perik brasha, noshim b'moed ma'ana shabalei metapkos. Al dir l'Rebbe mishum simcha. Regin l'sapek or l'tapech b'shmaskoil. They would clap and bang for simcha, to dance. Why is it also? Also, shemi yisakin klei shira. If you're going to get involved in this, you might be misakin klei shira. So the kachazinon, the avdid, we see everyone does that. And nobody ever protests against the people who dance on Shabbos. We learned earlier that when you have a Motzoei, you have to have a lechi. That's right at the opening between the Motzoei and the Rosh Hashanah to indicate that you're leaving the Rosh Hashanah and you're going into Rosh Hashanah. We said a woman shouldn't sit in the thickness of that lechi. She shouldn't sit right at the edge of the Motzoei, right where it joins the Rosh Hashanah. Why? Dilma migander lechefetz. Maybe one of the pail that she's holding she'll drop, and it'll roll into the Rosh Hashanah, and it'll be 4 amis, or maybe it'll be just it'll be the Rosh Hashanah. She might bring it back into the Rosh Hashanah, and if she brings it into Rashi's amish, she might bring it back into the Rosh Hashanah, and then she's bringing a chayvus from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah. So better she should sit away from the edge. We see they hold their pails and they do sit there at the edge of the Motzoei, and no one's protesting anything. Don't bother the Eden. Better they should be shagging while you Eden, because if you tell them, they're not going to listen to you anyway. We thought Hanamidi b'derabanan. You might think only by derabanan do we say Hanachlem. Aval b'daraisa, but by deraisa loy, maybe you have to protest. Loy loishna b'derabanan, loishna b'daraisa, you don't stop people. And how do I know that even by deraisa? The TOSH is the Yemekapurim deraisa. TOSH is Yemekapurim deraisa. The kochazinon lahu, the koachli b'shal shechetachshach. You see people eat and drink until it gets dark. We don't say anything. So you see, even by deraisa, you don't protest. Now, this halacha that you don't protest has certain conditions. Condition number 1 is it has to be that the Rov Oilam does it. If most people don't do it, you still have to protest. And item number 2 is it can't be something that's meforish. It has to be something that's learned from a drasha. Because again, if it's meforish, you still have to stop them from doing it. Now, what's interesting here is the Gemara has a shaila over here. If you only say mutav shishayim by the rabbanon or by the raisa, there is a bavusta. There's a bavusta nesivus that says that when you do an avera the rabbanon b'shaygig, you don't even have to do tshuva. Why don't you have to do tshuva? Because the whole makar of why you have to follow an issue the rabbanon is loisaser. Don't violate. Don't rebel against what the rabbanon say. If you didn't know about it, if you were a shoygig, nobody can translate that as a rebellion. Therefore, if you do an aveira, the rabbanon b'shoygig, by definition, you weren't over l'sasser. So you're not over anything when you do an aveira the rabbanon b'shoygig, and therefore, someone who's over the rabbanon b'shoygig, so the nesivis does not even have to do tshuva. The problem is, from our Gemara, it seems to indicate from our Gemara that there's this concept of mutav shu shoygin by you mazit. So it seems to indicate that the shoygin is also an aveira, because it could have said mutav that it should be mutter in ganzen. By a derabbanan, it's mutter in ganzen by you mazit. So there's a shtickle mashmayis here that maybe there is some aveira by a derabbanan. What also is interesting to note is it says you're not allowed to dance on Shabbos. That freaks me out a little bit, because dances and claps on Shabbos. So Shin Lamates Sif Gimel. Let's see what it says in Shin Lamates Sif Gimel. Does anybody have any information on why we dance on Shabbos?
Because you'll have music.
It could be. There's a svara that nowadays we're not worried that it would lead to be misakin. There is such a svara that said. So let's see what it says over here. Ein metapchin lahakos kafal kafal misafin lahakos kafal yerich. V'loy mirakin gzeri shebi yisakin kleshir. V'afilu lahakos be'etzba lakarka or laluach or tachas or achas keneged achas like snapping kedechem mishurim or the kashkish be'egos atin l'sach b'bezug kadesh yistek kozech yizvei oser gzeri shemi yisakin kleshir. L'sabik klachiyad mutter to clap this way you're allowed. Hagah. Everybody does it. Yes, I remember the Bezman is sorry, everything's motor nowadays. You know why? They know the Bekim Basias Klishir. We don't know how to make instruments. The Lekala Migzar, Shema, Yitaka, and Klishir. There's no Gzer nowadays that someone might fix his instrument. The Milsa Lashchichu. The Evshir Shalzen Nogul Hakel Bechol. That's why we are makel in all these things, because we don't fix things over anyway. Zokter Mishabura. Lahakal Bakol. Hi lahakal bakol koi al tipuach v'sipuk v'rikut. Talking about you're allowed to clap, you're allowed to bang, and you're allowed to dance. V'loy al shar dvar matskor misifseh, but not the other items mentioned in the sif. Afilu b'tipuach v'rikut ein kedai laniach haminig shaloi b'makam mitzvah elam mishmahanach lehem. So you should b'makam mitzvah, he says you're allowed to dance, but otherwise you should avoid tamazoi dancing. So that's what it says over here. So we do dance.
Yeah, well, Yossi, Baruch Hashem, in our shul, with the few occasions that we do dance, there are those who don't, and it's probably because they're machmer on this halacha.
Yeah.
Let's see what the Mishabur says. V'loy merakin, zokt the Mishabur. V'yom simchas Torah muter l'raked b'shah sharmim kelusim. The Torah mishum kavod Torah, given the less b'zel mishum shvus. Av b'shar simchas shal mitzvah going b'nesuyin afilu achay aser. Not banging some type of instruments. But avad, everyone seems to say for simcha shel mitzvah A and B is now there's any way we don't have the gzeira, Dr. Amor, because people don't know how to fix instruments. You'd be allowed to. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was clear. The item shouldn't think that you're not allowed to dance every Friday night. But the highlight is the dancing. So avad, you're allowed to dance.
That's just in the Vignitzer corner.
Yeah. Zogt Eile Gemara weiter. A woman is allowed to borrow a bilkis from her friend. Zogt Gemara, but Shabbos shuda aser. We said on Shabbos it's going to be aser to do. Ava b'choil shaperdami. But during the weekdays she's allowed to borrow from her friend, and these are like home baked loaves. This is inconsistent with Hill. Because there's a whole problem when it comes to borrowing items. Because let's say I borrow a commodity from you. I borrow bread from you, which is made out of wheat. It's a commodity. And wheat's worth $1 a pound. And then when I pay you back, wheat is now worth $2 a pound. So if I give you back a pound of wheat like I borrowed, it comes out that it's ribbis. I borrowed $1 and they gave you back $2. So how could you allow such a thing? Before she could lend anything to her friend, if it's a kikar, she should say, this kikar is the value of $1, you owe me $1. Why? Why should you do that? Why should you identify it with a dollar value? Maybe by the time her friend pays her back, chitin will be more expensive. And then the value of the kikar that she returns is more expensive. Hill might be able to agree with this. And there are certain cases where even Hill b'choil would be matter. Haba after the kids tameh, haba das below kids tameh. If I'm just borrowing from you a homemade bilka, when I give it back to you, there's no value associated with it. I might give you back more than you gave me. However, if there's set prices for a loaf of bread, it's a commodity that has a set price, then there's no problem. Because if when I borrow it from you, it's $1, and when I give it back, it's $1.25, it'll be obvious that there's a problem, and therefore I'm only going to give you back $1. So there's only a problem where it might get lost in the shuffle, and I won't realize that I'm giving you back something of a higher value. But when everything is clearly defined, then it'll be obvious, and we don't have to worry that she'll give back more than she took. Are you allowed to borrow? No, you're not allowed to borrow on Yom Tov. You're not allowed to. What if you borrow something from your friend on Yom Tov? Bezdin will not help you. Bezdin will not help you get it back. So that's actually earlier. That's much later in the Gemara. If you say Bezdin Yankel borrowed something from me on Yom Tov, he doesn't want to pay me back. Help me out. Bezdin will say we're sorry. We cannot take on this case. Rabbi Amar Nitna L'Tova, which is how we pass it. Rabbi says, of course, Avada you can mon the guy best. RebYosy Amar Nitna L'Tova, the Amar Nitna L'Tova, if you're going to say that people could mon it back, also l'michtav, then the lender might write it down. He's, I know I could mon him. I better keep track of it, and I'll write it down. Rabbi Amar Nitna L'Tova, you have to let the guy mon it back. The Amar Lo Nitna, then Lo Yoyev Lo. If I know that if I lend you something on Yom Tov, you don't have to pay me back, or I can't force you to pay me back, I'm not going to lend it to you. And if I don't lend it to you, then you're going to not have Simchas Yom Tov because you're not going to have what you need. Tanan, it says in our Mishnah, if you don't trust the guy, you can ask him to leave you a mashke. If you hold it, then I understand why. He would ask for a mashkin, because otherwise he has no way of retrieving what he lent out. If I can take him to Bezdin, let him borrow what you need, and then you'll take him to Nerv if he doesn't pay you back. Amar, that's not a kasha. I don't want to be busy writing to Bezdin. If I have a mashkin, I'm safe. So you don't have a raya from our Mishnah either way. So what they used to do, they didn't have refrigeration in those days. So what they would do is, on Yom Tov, if they wanted food, they would shech it fresh. And what they would do is, one person might not need the whole behemoth. So people would get together and share a behemoth that they would shech and use. Now, usually the guy who owns the behemoth, he's sort of, by distributing the meat, he's lending them that meat that he's hoping to retrieve and be paid back for after Yom Tov. Now, we know that at the end of Shemitah, according to the Shita that the Gemara is dealing with now, at the end of Shemitah year, any chayvis are bottled. So I'm not going to want to lend you anything Erev Rosh Hashanah at the end of a Shemitah year, because you won't have to pay me back. So what happened is, if a shirkat is a parah, the hechilka b'Rosh Hashanah. On the first day of Rosh Hashanah, I had an animal and I shechted it, and I of course gave everybody parts of it that I'm hoping they're going to pay me for after Yom Tov. Now, the first day of Rosh Hashanah at one point was a Sveika D'Yoma. It might have been the last day of El, or it might have been the first day of Tishrei. We don't know. So the first day of Rosh Hashanah, it's actually a suffix if it's the new year or if it's the last day of the Shemitah year. So if it comes out that the moon was not sighted until the next day, the first day Yom Tov ended up being the last day of the Shemitah year. Well, then Meshamet, then I cannot make anybody pay me back for the meat that I gave them on the first day Yom Tov, because it turns out that the first day Yom Tov was the last day of the Shemitah year. V'im lav, but if it's not a Chodesh over, meaning if today it turned out being Rosh Hashanah, so then I didn't have a problem with Shemitah being Meshamet. V'im lav ain't Meshamet. And therefore, if this year it turned out that the first day of Rosh Hashanah ended up being Taka the first day of Rosh Hashanah, then I don't have a problem, because the halva happened already in the new year. If you hold that you can never anyway extract something that was lent on Yom Tov, you can't extract it from in Bezdin, my Meshamet. What does it mean it's Meshamet? There's not Meshamet anything. You couldn't get it anyway. Even if today is the last day of the last year, forget Shemitah. Anyway, I can't get it back from you because I lent it to you on Yom Tov. So tomorrow, shiny hasam tiglay misa dechoilu. Verkehrt. Now that we said that really the second day of Rosh Hashanah was the day that the moon was sighted, so it come to Chodesh, the first day of Rosh Hashanah was Choil. If the first day of Rosh Hashanah is Choil, that's a halva. I would have been able to mon back in a Bezdin. But since there's a Shemitah here, that's why I cannot get it back. TOSH Mami Seifa. Let's look at the Seifa where we say the halva occurred on the first day of the new year. So it says, Im lav einim mishamet. Since today it was really Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, therefore the Shemitah is not mishamet. If something that you lend out on Yom Tov, you can go get back in Bezdin, hani dekatani einim mishamet. That's why it's relevant that Shemitah didn't knock off this halva, because now I can go get it back from the person who I lent it to in Bezdin. If I can't collect it back anyway, because I lent it to him on Yom Tov, So my ain't mishamet. What do you mean it's mishamet? I can't get it back from him anyway. So tomorrow, the oivlei shokel. All it means is that you're allowed to take it. If he gives it to you, you're allowed to take it. You can't mon him in Bezdin because we already said that anything you lend out on Yom Tov, you can't mon back in Bezdin. But Shemitah is not mishamet it, meaning you're allowed to take it back if he gives it to you voluntarily. So tomorrow, mechalal de reisha iyoyvlei loy shakel. Are you suggesting in the reisha where Shemitah was mishamet, even if the loiva wants to pay you back, you're not allowed to take the money back? Zok Gemara, no. Reisha tzarich l'meimar mishamerani. Because Gemara saying avada, we know by Shemitah, if the loiva wants to pay you back, he's allowed to pay you back, and you're allowed to take the money. So don't suggest that I'm not allowed to take the money back because there's Shemitah here. Rather, the halach is tzarich l'meimar mishamerani. If since the Shemitah passed, since the end of Shemitah passed, technically this choiv was absolved by Shemitah. The halacha is if you lend somebody money and you didn't write a prosbul, and the Shemitah year passed, he's allowed to pay you back. But you have to tell him, when he gives it back to you, you have to tell him, Mishamarani, I'm not expecting it back. I am adhering to the rules of Shemitah. And if the lawyer says, Aval Pikein, even though I know legally Shemitah absolved my choiv, I still want to pay you back, then you're allowed to accept the money. So in the Reisha, you'd have to say Mishamarani, because the end of the Shemitah year passed after you lent him the meat. But Seifa, where it turns out that I only lent him the meat on the first day of Yom Tov, on the first day of Tishrei, so we already passed the cutoff date for Shemitah. Lo tzarich l'meimar mishamarani. He doesn't have to say mishamarani. Kidetnan, hamachzer choiv b'shvius. If someone pays back a loan on shvius, yomer loy, the malva has to say mishamarani. I'm not asking for it back. There's Shemitah here. V'im omer loy afal pikein. And if the loiva says, even though I know I don't have to pay you back, I want to pay you back anyway, then you kabel memenu, you should accept, you're allowed to accept the money. And how do you know that you have to tell him Shamarani? It's because shenemar v'zed dvar hashmita. You have to speak out. The malva has to speak out. It's Shemitah. I don't expect you to pay it back. And if he gives it to you anyway, you can take it back. Rabbi Avi shakel mashkoina. Rabbi Avi, whenever he lent out something on Yom Tov, he took a mashkin to make sure that he can get it back. Rabbi Bar Ula Mari Marume. He would after Yom Tov, he would go to the guy who he lent something to. So let's say your rabbi lent something to Yankel on Yom Tov. After Yom Tov, he told Yankel, can I borrow your lawnmower? And Yankel said, sure. And then when Yankel came back to Rabbi, could I have my lawnmower back? Rabbi said, no problem. When you give me back what I lent you. So therefore, he didn't have a problem of money and did. And this goes back to what Akiva was asking about doing business on Pesach. Makdish Adam Pitzchoi b'Shabbos. You're allowed to be Makdish, your carbon Pesach on Shabbos. V'chagigasa b'Yom Tov. And then Yom Tov, you're allowed to be Makdish, your carbon Chagiga. Name a Messiah. Let's bring a raya to Rabbi Yochanan. Because our Mishnah says, V'chein Erev Pesach b'Yerushalayim, Shechol Yos b'Shabbos, Maniach Talisa Etzlo, you can leave your talis by the merchant, and you could take this animal from him, V'noit Les Peschoi, and then V'oisa Imei Cheshron L'Achi Yom Tov. And then you pay back the animal merchant after Yom Tov. So you have a raya from here. If I just bought the animal on Shabbos, I obviously had to have been makdish it. So you see from here a raya to Rabbi Yochanan that you're allowed to be makdish to carbon Pesach on Shabbos. So no, maybe I wasn't makdish. That's not what our Mishnah is talking about. Our Mishnah is saying that on Pesach, if I already have my carbon and it's already kadosh, I'm allowed to accept other people into my group to join me with my carbon Pesach on Shabbos if it's Erev Pesach. But the Meikora Mikdash V'Kai, I had already been Makdish this animal before Shabbos, and therefore you don't have a raya from our Mishnah that you could be Makdish something on Shabbos. You're not allowed to join in with somebody. Again, this has to do with the same thing we discussed earlier. I'm shechting the animal on Yom Tov. So people join me and say, listen, I also want meat. You want meat? 10 people want meat. So we all join together to shecht an animal, so we all get to meat. So the Mishnah says, you're not allowed to do that because you're not allowed to do business on Yom Tov. And basically, we're buying a behemoth together, we're splitting it up. That's not allowed. Over here, the reason why it was mutter is given the rogel atzloi command the imni be'meikar domi. This is a guy who every year he joins my carbon Pesach. So our Mishnah that says that people are allowed to join my Korban Pesach, it's because every year they join. So it's as if he was already pre-joined. But Tanya Poshia, a person is allowed to go to a roya who he normally buys meat from, and the roya can give him a tle for his Korban Pesach, and he can be makdish it, and he'll be yoitza with it. So again, you have a raya that you can be makdish an animal on Shabbos. So tomorrow, since this guy bought his esrog from the same esrog soicher every year, he bought his Korban Pesach from the same Korban Pesach dealer every year. When you went to Rabbi Arnov, if anyone ever bought Arba meaning from Rabbi Arnov, if you came to him and he would bring out your lulav and your esrog, and if you told him, "Can I see what else you have?" he would say, "Vos heis, das is deins." It was grown on the tree. The tree was planted with you in mind. This is your esrog. What do you mean to look at something else? This is yours. So this roya knew every year that this fellow is buying from him. So the roya was already makdish on behalf of the owner before. But Lamaisa, the Brisa says makdish. The Gemara says the Brisa says makdish. So tomorrow, hektish ilu midarbanan. It doesn't really mean a real hektish. The real hektish was done by the roya before Shabbos. In fact, tomorrow, Rabbi Yochanan actually say that you're allowed to be makdish an animal on Shabbos. Rabbi Yochanan halacha kistam mishnah. Utnan loy makdishin, v'loy marichin, v'loy machrimin, v'loy magbiin chumas and maishris. So how could Rabbi Yochanan say you're allowed to be makdish a Korban Pesach on Shabbos? From this brayso, you're not allowed to. Where did Rabbi Yochanan say you could be makdish a Korban Pesach on Shabbos? That's only because you have to bring it today. If you have to bring it today, you're allowed to be makdish today. But the brayso that says you're not allowed to do it, it's b'chayv she'elam kavul zman. I said I was going to bring an oila. So I'm not allowed to be makdish that oila today on Yom Tov or on Shabbos because I can be makdish it on the Yom Shal Choyel. But if I have to do it today, Zok Rabbi Yochanan Avada, you're allowed to do it today. So I guess we could stop here. So Akiva, going back to what you said about Masul Matan b'Shabbos, at the end of the day, all these people who were buying things on Shabbos were buying it from people who sort of already had it prepared for them. So I'm not sure if that's the same thing as regular business on Shabbos.
Go ahead.
So what time are we learning tomorrow?
Yeah, but that's also with the, the instruction doesn't answer really the aliyahs and the exchange of it.